Hello everyone from a very windy Bunvarden. What strange times we're living in, and what sort of a world will we go back to when some form of normality as we knew it returns again? We've been in lockdown since the 17th of March and we're still self-isolating. We were put under lockdown by Canadian law as set down by our daughter Catherine, who lives in Vancouver. So we started earlier than most. As you know, I'm a people person. I'm always involved with the grandchildren, with extended family, with organisations and groups that I'm involved in. So I can tell you it all came as a bit of a shock to me. I think for the first couple of weeks, we didn't do very much. We just tried to adjust to things as they were. But then my aunt, who lives alone and is almost 80, wasn't coping emotionally, so she came to self-isolate with us. She's my mother's sister, so she cracked the whip and the work began. Libby, like you, our garden over 30 years ago was a blank canvas, but it was painted over and painted over and painted over, and it literally was a mess. We started last year to clear areas to replant with the help of Frank Taggart. And Frank, we miss you. But as I say, we started afresh. We wed, we pruned, we dug up, we dug out, we moved plants, we power hosed, we painted. Sorry, John, we did you out of a wee bit of work, but there's still plenty left. We repaired, we excavated roots. It actually took us 3 weeks to dig the roots out of the 2 front beds. There were many hot baths with Epsom salts so that we could actually move the next day, but I actually enjoyed it. I accepted the freedom, the time to think, the time to reflect, the time to talk to God in my own rambling way. What had been a burden for about 12 years suddenly became a blessing and a joy. I remember Reverend Philip Kerr from Balrashane telling us at a PW meeting that if we found something we had to do, a trial or a burden, just imagine we were doing it for God and see how that changed her attitude. And it does work. I took some videos of the garden, which Heather very kindly has tried to make sense of, and I'll let you see those and then share my reflections with you. This is our view from the back window, and where we feed the birds all the year round. And this is outside from our living area. These are the later potatoes. Our earlier potatoes have been dug. Unlike last year, I was planting them when others were digging theirs. And this is where we watched all the birds nesting in the spring. We had blue tits, we had starlings, we had sparrows, and we almost had a wren. We woke one Sunday morning to the glorious sound of a wren singing his heart out, perched on the handle of the lawnmower. And a female came and she looked around the box and she went round, she went in and she went out, but she disappeared. And we were all saying, please, please nest there, but the lady, she said no. But later on, we heard them up at the back of the shed, so she chose a nest up there, and we saw the little ones about a short time after they had fledged. Now this is up to the back, which we have thoroughly enjoyed this year because of the glorious weather. And when we came up here in the spring, there was nothing. It was completely bare because we had cleared everything away Last year everything had been overgrown, and now we've got it back into manageable shape again. And we can go on up. And this strange looking hole in the middle of the garden was a small water feature, and I am planning a wildlife pond. But I need a little help and a little advice, as it is a sloping site and my engineering skills aren't very good. And the bricks are laid out for, hopefully, a glass house, a greenhouse. And this takes us down to the vegetable area. Well, really fruit. We have black currants, red currants and gooseberries along here. And then down here we had our potatoes, rhubarb, beans, strawberries, raspberries. And as I say, this year we did get everything planted in time and had a wonderful harvest. And that's us back round to the back of the house again, and a new bed we created in what was just a rough area, and it badly needs wed at the moment, but we'll get that done, or I'll get it done. Stanley doesn't bend anymore. These two beds had become so overgrown that they practically met in the driveway. So they were stripped bare at the beginning of the year, and at the beginning of lockdown we had 2 empty beds. Well, almost empty beds. The tree was left and some of the larger shrubs were left. And then the last part is the orchard. Which again we hadn't looked after very well, and we had heavily pruned this spring, so there won't be much of a crop this year. The first thing I realised was that we were not prepared. I did have my seed potatoes, as last year when I was talking about planting ours, Beth Smith said, "Oh, Doreen, we're ready to dig ours." So I got them early. But I had no seeds. I had no lettuce, no carrots, no beans, no peas, no tomato plants, no fertiliser, no compost. And that made me think about our lives. We do not know what is ahead of us. We don't know what God's plan is for us, but we must be ready to answer it and answer his call to do what he asks. But we cannot be ready if we're not in touch with him through reading his word, talking to him through prayer, listening for his answers, and learning more through our Sunday services. Thank you, Nancy, and all the team for the wonderful support every Sunday. I felt really blessed to be isolated where we were. And in my prayers, I couldn't help but remember those who were living and isolated in very difficult circumstances. And that list is endless. Those who were living with no outside space. Those who were living with difficult family situations. Those living with illness or nursing someone who was ill, physically or mentally. Those caring for someone with a disability. Those who have lost loved ones. Those whose jobs are insecure. And our children who are missing out on schooling and missing out on those friendships that are very necessary for them growing up. Everyone's coping without the help of family members and the community support that we have so lucky to have in Northern Ireland. When I eventually had the potatoes planted and the strawberry and raspberries wed, I stood back and looked at it and thought, oh, that's just lovely. And then I thought, it doesn't really matter what the beds look like. What is important is what they'll produce. And we can say the same about ourselves and our relationship with God. God doesn't care what we look like. He cares deeply about what our lives produce. And again, we cannot produce anything worthwhile for him if we don't feed and nurture our soul and make sure that it's weed-free. The Wrens, whose songs we loved, reminded me that God always answers prayer, but not necessarily in the way we want or the way we understand or expect. The male wren builds several nests and he sings his heart out at each one until the female picks one. Sometimes we don't even realise that God has answered our prayers because he hasn't answered them in the way that we wanted, but he always does. The last thing I want to share is when all is said and done, all that matters is our relationship with God. Stanley's mother, who's in a home, developed COVID-19 and we had a very difficult few weeks. We couldn't see her for ourselves. We could only rely on her carers telling us how she was, and not all the carers saw things in the same way. So it was very stressful. All we could do was pray. And as we talked about it, we realised all that she needed to know was that God was with her. And we just prayed that she would be at peace. And thank you for everyone who prayed for Ruby and prayed for us. And as you know, she recovered and does not remember anything. Her hearing has been affected, but she's back to worrying about us and worrying about lots of things that a 95-year-old shouldn't worry about. But that's Ruby, and that's how she lives her life, and may she continue to do so for a very long time. I just want to finish with the last two verses of the poem God's Garden by Dorothy Frances Gurley. You all know the verse before the last, and my mum had it carved in a stone in her garden for many years. The kiss of the sun for pardon, the song of the bird for mirth. One is nearer God's heart in the garden than anywhere else on earth. And the last verse says, for he broke it for us in the garden, under the olive trees, where the angel of strength was the warden, and the soul of the world found ease.